Hello, this is Adventures with Alexander, which is an ongoing series following the life and adventures of Alexander the Great. So, first of all, who was he? Why are we still talking about him? Why was he so great? Why are there so many stories and references to him? To start with, we have to go back before he's born. We have to learn about his family background and Macedonia, because although he's often described as being Greek, at this point, Macedonia was actually a separate kingdom, and Greece was made up of a number of city-states. So Macedonia was this region here, and then around it were a number of other kingdoms and then city-states. So Greece, for example, we have Athens forming a city-state here in the region referred to as Attica. We have Sparta down in the region called Laconia. We have all these different independent city-states. And Macedonia is up here. Now, when we talk about this, we're going to refer to Alexander as king, his father as a king, but the actual word that was used was Basileus. Now, Alexander was part of the royal family of Macedonia, and we're going to start by talking about his grandfather, Amyntas III. Now, Amyntas had seized the throne after assassinating the previous king, and he had several wives because at this point it was very common to have a polygamous royal family. Some of these would be political marriages. They would form alliances with royal families or from prominent members of the nobility of various city-states. But the other thing was that it meant that they would have a large number of heirs. Unfortunately, having a large number of heirs often leads to squabbling between the aforementioned heirs. So Amyntas III had two wives, and the one that was most prominent was Eurydice. And she had one daughter and three sons. Now, the three sons gave a really good number of possible heirs. Amyntas III's second marriage was to Gygaea, and she also had three sons, but they weren't considered to be as significant as Eurydice's sons. So these three sons in here, they played prominent roles in governance, they were in the military, but they weren't being groomed for the throne. Now, Alexander's father, Philip, was actually the third son. So he was quite a way down the inheritance. And normally it would have been quite unlikely for him to inherit the throne because he had two healthy, strong older brothers. So in 369 BC, Amyntas III dies, and his eldest son, Alexander, inherits the throne. Now, Alexander was shortly assassinated by a nobleman called Ptolemy of Elorus. And Ptolemy had kind of zoomed in on the widow Eurydice, and he forms a relationship with her. He has her eldest son assassinated, which means that her second son, Perdiccas, inherits the throne, but he's still underage. So that means that Ptolemy is able to step in as the regent. He's going to be the ruler. He is having a relationship with the Queen Mother, in effect, Eurydice, the widow of the former king, and he is taking on the role of regent for her second son, Perdiccas. Now, a few years later, Perdiccas is old enough to rule in his own stead, and Ptolemy of Elorus didn't want to hand over the power. So instead, he is assassinated, he's killed. Perdiccas marries and has a child with Francesca de Elamea. Now, it's really hard to find information on her. A lot of places, a lot of the books don't give you any name. We've got no details on her. We do have information that they had a child, Amyntas, named after Amyntas in that royal family, and he is going to be referred to as Amyntas IV. Now, when he is still a young child, Perdiccas is killed in battle. He's fighting in Illyria, which is one of the neighbouring kingdoms. So he is now dead, and the young child, Amyntas IV, is technically the king. Now, because he is underage, he's a young child, Philip, who was the third brother, is appointed as the regent. But very quickly, he takes the throne for himself. He doesn't have Amyntas IV killed. He basically brings him up in the royal family. When he is grown up, he marries him to his eldest daughter. So he brings him up as a prince in the royal family, but he has effectively been removed from the succession. Now, Philip had 7 wives. We're going to remove this one here for the time being. The 7th wife he marries much later. The first 6 wives are members of other royal families or noble families from other city-states. And the reason for having so many was to make those alliances. So, for example, we have a marriage to Audata of Illyria, which is up here. We have marriage to Phila of Elamea. We have a number of marriages, and we notice that they've all got names of. They're always from somewhere significant. Now, the one that we're going to talk about the most is Olympias of Epirus, which is this area here, because she is Alexander's mother. Now, within a very short time, Philip II has 2 sons born. One is Aridius, and then a few months later, his son Alexander is born. Now, they're very similar ages. There's less than a year between them. But Aridius was described as having a disability. He's described as having learning difficulties. There are some stories that it was because Olympias had used drugs on him or had set spells on him. and the idea was that even though he's slightly older, to remove him as a threat to Alexander. Is this true? Well, what's more likely is that they're just two different kids, and that Aridius, maybe he has a mild learning difficulty, maybe he's just trying to be compared or not compared to Alexander, because Alexander, from a very early age, is very much the golden child. So if we look here, we can see that of Philip's wives, you know, we have some daughters. This is the eldest daughter here, who actually he marries off later to Amyntasphore, his nephew, who he displaced. We have Thessalonice. We have here, though, the son Aridius, and then Olympias has Alexander, and then Cleopatra. Cleopatra was a very common name for the Greeks. It means glory of her father. Now, Alexander is born at Pella, which was the capital of Macedonia at the time. So these pictures are showing us some of the ruins of Pella now. And there were a lot of stories of his birth. Now, a lot of this is probably PR, either at the time or later. So, for example, the night before her marriage, Olympias dreams that her womb is struck by a thunderbolt, a symbol of Zeus. Now, she's probably here trying to make a link that Alexander is blessed by the gods. This is a divine birth, that there is a link to the god Zeus. Philip dreams that he sealed Olympias's womb with a seal with a lion on it, a sign of majesty, of a fighter. And the day that Alexander is born, Philip receives several pieces of good news. His horses had won at the Olympic Games, and one of his generals defeated the Illyrian and Paeonian armies. Now, when we talk about Alexander's birth, sometimes it's hard to separate the truth from the various stories that were put about later. So things like Olympias saying that Zeus came to her in a dream with a thunderbolt, and that led to Alexander's birth. Maybe she said that at the time, maybe it was a bit later, but throughout his life, Alexander made a big deal about this, about the fact that, he was linked to Zeus, because that helps to give him status, that helps to give him legitimacy as a king. Now, there are a lot of stories about Alexander, both from his lifetime and afterwards. After his death, the stories continue to be written down. We find them in Greek, in Latin, and then by the Middle Ages, there are whole books referred to as the Romance of Alexander, which are stories about Alexander's life and adventures. Now, by that point, a lot of these stories were fantasy. So, for example, there are stories of him meeting the Amazons, you know, but whatever, whether it's based in history or fantasy, these are the most widely distributed stories aside from the Bible during the Middle Ages. And Alexander is referred to as one of the 9 great heroes, the 9 worthies. So these were like the medieval pantheon of chivalry. This is the Justice League. These are our superheroes. And there were 9 of these. And Alexander was one of them and was actually considered to be the most popular. He's kind of the Captain America of the 9 worthies, because he is seen as this king, this general who is unbeatable. So what we've got up to here is Alexander's birth. We've spent 15 minutes just to get to him being born. What we'll look at next time is his youth and up until the time when he inherits the throne from his father, Philip II. Thank you.